I'd like to share a short testimony that was written by Dwight Nelson. Are we familiar with Dwight Nelson? Some of us may be, others may not be. Dwight Nelson, I believe, is a pastor, and among other things. And the topic of his story is how Steps to Personal Revival, which is a particular book, he says, how Steps to Personal Revival has changed my life. We already heard a story earlier, but would you like to have a change in your life? No matter how good you may feel that you are today, I believe that we still have some work to do. What do you say? Amen. All right, let's listen closely as we listen to Dwight Nelson's experience. And it starts out like this. Listen carefully. It says, last August, a young man in British Columbia camp meeting. Now, I'm not sure what year this was that he wrote this, but he says, last August, a young man in the British Columbia camp meeting where and I'll read it in the first person, okay? So where I was preaching, Dwight Nelson, gave me a book. I'd never seen the book before, nor had I ever heard of the author. But the man told me there were over 600,000 copies of the book circulating the world in 29 languages. He'd never heard of this book before. Little did I know, he says, this short book would end up dramatically changing my life. He goes on to say, the way I pray, the way I preach, the way I relate to others, it says that it has changed his ministry. That's powerful, coming from a pastor who was at a camp meeting. Goes on to say, in all my years of schooling, preaching, and teaching, nobody had ever told me or taught me that the Bible and Ellen White teach us to daily petition God for a fresh baptism of the Holy Spirit. Amen. And I'm reading his testimony, but I want that to resonate with us. A daily, fresh baptism of the Holy Spirit must be requested how often? Daily. He goes on to say that how could I have gone this far through pastoring, through preaching, and never learned such a compelling truth? Now I'm reading his story, but I want us to relate it to our story. Is that okay? Sometimes we have a tendency to say, to look at the other person and not, but the point here is to relate it to how our relationship with the Holy Spirit is. Is that okay? Right. He goes on to say, but that's what Helmut Habil's book, I'm sure I didn't say that correctly, book Steps to Personal Revival has taught me. By the time I returned home from that camp meeting, I had read the entire book. In fact, I have now read it 4 times, the one book. How many times? 4 times. And my life is changed. You can ask the woman I live with and the people that I pastor. For years, I have preached on receiving the gift of the Holy Spirit. Let me repeat that. For years, I have preached on receiving the gift of the Holy Spirit. Series of sermons on this vital theme. But now, he says, I have discovered a way to meet with Jesus every morning. I have discovered a way to meet with Jesus every morning and do just as he did every morning with his Father. And that is to ask for a fresh baptism of his Spirit. Isn't that beautiful? Amen. Encouraging. He goes on to say, humbly I testify that God has raised the bar of prayer in my life. This is his testimony. He said, I used to spend much time in the Word and a comparatively short time in actual prayer. Are you following? Now my practice is reversed. What is reversed? The time in prayer versus the time in the Word. Okay, follow carefully now. It says, I spend much time on my knees in my early morning prayer closet in communion with God, and then turn to His Word for communication with me. Are you following? All right. He goes on to say that my preaching has gained a new freedom, a new intensity. My leadership with my team and my people has been raised to another level. Amen. And if you know Pastor Dwight Nelson in his early years, I would venture to say that you would agree that he was a powerful speaker. But he's saying now that it has been raised to another level. Suddenly coincidences, listen to this now, suddenly coincidences, have you ever had a coincidence? Oh, yeah. Okay, he says coincidences, what one writer calls synchronicity, again, are multiplying. It's as if someone is orchestrating my days and my nights. My chance meetings are multiplying. My emails, my chance emails and my conversations are increasing. It's as if the Holy Spirit is personally directing my waking hours, even my sleeping ones. In fact, I've come to know Him as a very personal and true friend. Would you like to have that experience where Jesus becomes your personal friend, have a personal experience with Him? I know I would, most certainly would, to have a closer walk with Jesus. Then he asks this question. Listen carefully. Dwight Nelson says, why am I telling you this story? Think about that. Why am I telling you this story, he says. And then he answers his question. I have nothing to gain from this testimony, but I am deeply convicted that you do, that I do. He says, Jesus is coming soon. Let me repeat that. Jesus, Elder Nash, is coming soon. Do you believe that? Do you believe that Jesus is coming soon? But do you believe it? No. Listen carefully. Dwight Nelson is asking if you believe it because he believed it. Yes. Right? So the question is, do you believe that Jesus Christ is coming soon?
Yeah, we look for Him every day.
We've heard about it. Yeah. We've made the statement many times. But do you believe it? You see, we still have a world, an entire generation to reach with the everlasting gospel. We simply cannot accomplish this great mission on our own, he says. He goes on to say that our only hope is to learn what Jesus knew, to practice what Paul and the first disciples practiced. He goes on to say that we must have the daily baptism. Let me repeat that for emphasis. We must have the daily baptism of the Holy Spirit upon our own lives and our ministry. And the only way that we will have it is if we humbly ask for it daily. Not when you got baptized. Not when you really felt good. But how often? Daily. Do you have some bad days? Sure. Do you have some good days? Do you ask only on the good days? Or you ask on the bad days? You have mediocre days? You ask how often?
Every day.
Every day. Every day. But how do you ask for it, he says? Humbly. Interesting. I don't want you to miss these. I know that our pastor is going to deal with this, but I feel compelled to make sure that you do not miss the point that is being shared here. The only way that we will have what? The outpouring of the Holy Spirit is to humbly ask for it every day. I don't know who you are, but I am praying for you as I write this, Dwight Nelson says. The promised gift is yours and mine for the asking. After all, didn't Jesus promise us that if you then who are evil know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father which is in heaven give the Holy Spirit to those of us who ask daily, continually. Ask him. Luke chapter 11, verse 13. Won't you join me in that daily asking?